In the fog-wrapped hills of San Francisco, where mansions rose like monuments to money that had forgotten its own weight, there lived a young woman named Rowan Rivera. To the wealthy elite whose marble halls she cleaned, she was nearly invisible, just another girl in a pressed black uniform, her footsteps absorbed by carpets that cost more than she would earn in 5 years, her presence so carefully calibrated to nothingness that household staff often spoke across her as though she were furniture made of air and silence. Every Tuesday morning before the guards arrived, Rowan moved through the underground poker room of the Castellano mansion like a ghost collecting evidence of other people's lives. Cigar ash settled into the grooves of mahogany side tables. Empty crystal glasses held the fingerprints of men whose names she would never know. She polished each one with a white cloth, her fingers remembering the weight of every surface while her mind stayed fixed on the numbers that had become her only language. $78 folded in her locker. Rent due in 3 days. No way to close the gap. The arithmetic of survival was simple and brutal. At the Golden Meridian Hotel where she worked nights as a server, Derek Collins, the restaurant manager with slick back hair and teeth too white to trust, kept the tips she earned. All of them. He called it accounting for breakage, for the table she stayed too long at, for the way she moved too slowly through his vision of how a woman should serve. The threats about her job security felt like facts of nature rather than extortion, spoken so casually over cigarette smoke that she had stopped questioning whether she had any choice at all. Her hand brushed against the torn envelope in her apron pocket, a gesture so automatic she barely felt it anymore. Full scholarship. For years. A name printed in blue ink on cream-colored paper from San Francisco State University. Received 8 months ago. Accepted conditionally, pending her enrollment deposit of $5,000 by August 15th. The date had passed in July. Then August. Then September. The envelope remained in her pocket, creased and soft as a prayer that had been answered too late. The morning light through the penthouse windows was thin and grey. Rowan worked quickly, her movements efficient, speaking to no one, acknowledged by no one. This was the arrangement. She had learned long ago that invisibility was safer than being seen. What she did not know was that Giovanni Castellano watched her from the doorway sometimes, his storm-grey eyes following the careful geometry of her movements, something in her hunched shoulders triggering a recognition he could not name. What she did not know was that the small girl she had begun protecting at the Harbor Street Women's Shelter 3 months ago, the 6-year-old named Ava with copper-colored braids and eyes too serious for her age, had been the reason he first noticed Rowan at all. Hours collapsed into hours. Rowan moved from one house to another, each mansion a variation on the same theme of wealth that felt like a physical pressure against her skin. At 5 in the afternoon, she changed out of her uniform into a black server's dress that was fraying at the hem. By 6, she was at the Golden Meridian, tying on an apron, preparing her face into the expression that meant she was already gone. Derek Collins stood in the kitchen, his shirt unbuttoned to the sternum, a heavy gold chain catching the fluorescent lights. He watched her arrange water glasses on a tray with the intensity of a man watching something he owned being handled. "Table 9's waiting," he said. His voice never sounded like a request. "Yes, sir," Rowan replied. The words came automatically, shaped by repetition into something smaller than speech. "You look tired tonight, Rowan." "That's not good. Customers notice when you look tired. They tip less. You understand what that means for you?" She did not respond. She had learned that responses gave him something to feed on. He stepped closer, the smell of his cologne mixing with cigarette smoke and something underneath it, something sharp. "I asked you a question." "I understand," she said. "Good girl. See, you're smart when you want to be. You're just not very useful otherwise. 9's waiting. Move." The restaurant filled with the sound of ice and conversation and silverware against china. Rowan moved between tables like a system that had been perfectly calibrated for invisibility. She poured water. She cleared plates. She smiled at a man who grabbed her wrist while ordering dessert and called it friendliness. She smiled at a woman who told her the soup was cold and watched the other servers pretend not to hear. By midnight, her feet had forgotten what it felt like to stand still. The tip sat in her apron pocket, $17.43. Derek would take it in the morning. He always did. At 2:30 in the morning, the shelter phone rang. It was the night supervisor, her voice tight with something that sounded like fear. "Are you Rowan? Did you work with Ava Rodriguez today?" Everything in her stopped. "Yes." "Is she okay?" "What happened?" "She's fine. She's fine. But there was an incident. There's a man here. He says he wants to help. He says your name. He's in a very expensive coat. There are other men outside. Some of them I think they might have guns." The phone went silent in her hand. The fog had thickened on the streets of San Francisco, turning the world into something half-real. Rowan took the bus to Harbor Street, her hands gripping the metal rail, her mind refusing to move forward. When she arrived, 3 black SUVs were parked in a perfect line outside the shelter, their engines running, exhaust curling into the fog like something alive. A man stood in the shelter's front room. He was tall, perhaps 6'2", with dark hair silvered at the temples and a scar running from his left eye to his cheekbone like a knife wound that had healed wrong. He wore a cashmere coat that probably cost more than Rowan's entire annual salary, and his wrists carried gold, a watch thick as a heartbeat, 2 rings on his right hand that caught the light in a way that suggested they had been worn in the same place for a very long time. This was Giovanni Castellano. Behind him stood 2 men in dark suits. The first, Rocco, had the build of someone who solved problems by removing them. The second, Franco, watched everyone with the expression of someone counting exits. "You are Rowan," Giovanni said. Not a question. His voice was deep and solid like an oath. "Yes." She could not make her voice steady. "Is Ava?" "She is safe. She is in the back." But there was a situation. A man came to pick her up this evening claiming to be a family member. The supervisor called the police. The police called me. I have a standing arrangement with Harbor Street for such matters. The world tilted slightly. "Why would you have an arrangement with a shelter?" Giovanni studied her face. "I have a daughter. She is 6 years old. Or she would be, if she had lived past her first breath." He said this the way someone might discuss weather, simply, with no inflection. "My wife and I had a nursery prepared. Painted yellow. We chose her name. Ava. She was born on a winter night and she died 3 hours later, and I have not spoken her name aloud in 15 years. Until 3 months ago, when I saw her again in a shelter in San Francisco." Rowan felt something collapse inside her chest. "You have been protecting her," Giovanni continued. "The director told me. You sat with her during the nightmares. You taught her to read the colors of her feelings. She calls you the kind lady." Those were her exact words. "The kind lady." He paused. "I want to know why you did that." "Because," Rowan said, and her voice broke like glass, "because someone needed to." He nodded slowly, as though she had confirmed something he already knew. "Come," he said. "She is asking for you. And then we need to speak about Derek Collins." The air in the shelter had stopped moving. Even the fog outside seemed to be listening, pressing against the windows with the weight of something waiting to be told. Rowan followed him toward the back room, where Ava was waiting, and behind them, Rocco and Franco exchanged a look neither had seen in their years working for Giovanni Castellano, a look that said everything was about to change. At 3:03 in the morning, Rowan would stumble into his penthouse covered in blood. She did not know that yet. She only knew that when she took Ava's small trembling hand, something inside her that had been invisible for so long finally began to take shape. The marble floors of the Castellano mansion stretch endlessly in the pre-dawn darkness, each footstep absorbed by carpets that cost more than Rowan Rivera would earn in 5 years. She moves through these halls like a ghost, her black uniform pressed sharp enough to cut, her presence so carefully calibrated to invisibility that the household staff speak across her as though she were furniture. It is 5 o'clock on a Tuesday morning, and the mansion still sleeps. Rowan pushes her cart through the corridor. The air smells like old money and cigar smoke trapped in leather. Chandeliers the size of men hang from ceilings that stretch 20 feet high, their crystals catching the dim light and throwing it back like broken glass. She has been cleaning this place for 4 months. Not once has anyone looked at her directly and asked her name. The poker room awaits on the ground floor. She uses her key, the master key that Rosa the head housekeeper gave her with explicit instructions, and steps inside. The green felt table dominates the center of the room like an altar. Leather chairs surround it, abandoned mid-conversation, as though the men who sat here might return at any moment and resume their discussion of money and power and the slow accumulation of favors owed. Champagne flutes still sticky with expensive liquor sit on side tables. Rowan collects them one by one, running her thumb over the rims. The champagne residue has crystallized into a thin film. She knows the brand, Crystal Brut, because she heard one of the men mention the price when she was supposed to be invisible. $700 a bottle. She has never had champagne. Not once in her 28 years. She begins polishing. Each glass receives the same attention, cloth moved in small circles, the motion meditative, her mind somewhere else entirely. The $78 folded in her locker downstairs is eating at her consciousness like acid. Rent is due in 3 days. 3 days and she is short by $307. The math is simple and brutal and unchangeable. She has worked 63 hours this month. At the Golden Meridian Hotel, where Derek Collins manages the restaurant with the gentleness of a prison warden, she earns $12 an hour. Before tips. Before Derek takes his 40% commission. Before the money disappears into air. A door opens upstairs. Footsteps move across the ceiling. Rowan freezes mid-polish, listening. The footsteps belong to Miguel, the driver. She can tell by the weight and cadence. He walks like a man carrying something precious. The footsteps fade toward the kitchen. She returns to the glasses. The sound of Rosa's voice reaches her from the hallway, sharp and efficient. Rosa is calling someone's name. Not hers. Rosa never calls her name. Rosa calls her by gesture and pointed finger and the slight tilt of her chin that means move, work, finish. Rowan sets down the cloth and exits the poker room, locking the door behind her. She climbs the back stairs, the narrow ones that servants use, and finds Rosa in the master hallway. The head housekeeper is in her 60s, with silver hair pulled tight against her scalp and lips pressed into a permanent line of disapproval. She wears a uniform identical to Rowan's, except Rosa's uniform fits a woman with authority. Rowan's fits a woman with an expiration date. The ballroom needs the chandeliers wiped down, Rosa says without preamble. Not the crystal. The brass. And do not scratch anything. Mr. Castellano has a meeting tonight. Rowan nods. She has learned that silence is safer than words. Also, Rosa continues, her eyes moving past Rowan as though speaking to the air itself, do not go near his private office. Do not even look at the door. Some rooms in this house are not for certain people. Understand? Yes, Rowan says, barely a whisper. Rosa turns and walks away, her footsteps crisp and authoritative on the marble. Rowan stands alone in the hallway. The ballroom is on the 3rd floor. The chandeliers will take 3 hours. She checks the small watch she bought at a thrift store for $2. It is now 5:51 in the morning. She will finish by 9. She will shower in the staff bathroom. She will change into her waitress uniform. She will drive to the Golden Meridian Hotel across the bay, where Derek Collins and his slicked hair and his wandering hands are already waiting. The ballroom explodes with light when she enters. The chandeliers hang like captured stars, hundreds of them, casting illumination across a dance floor of polished wood. The room is designed for beauty. For celebration. For people who belong here. Rowan sets up her ladder beneath the first chandelier. She climbs. Her hands are rough from work, calloused, the nails broken and uneven. She begins to wipe the brass with a cloth that smells like linseed oil. The work is methodical. Each chandelier takes 20 minutes. There are 14 chandeliers. She does the math without meaning to. By 8:06, if she does not stop for water or rest, she will finish. She does not stop for water or rest. By 8:52, she is climbing down from the final chandelier when she hears Rosa's voice again, this time speaking to Miguel downstairs. Have the car ready by 10, Rosa says. Mr. Castellano wants to visit the shelter in the Mission. He goes every Tuesday at the same time. The director knows to expect him. The shelter. The St. Francis Women's Shelter. Rowan's hand still. She sets down her cloth. The shelter is where she goes after midnight, after the dinner shift at the Golden Meridian ends, after she has changed out of her waitress uniform and back into a borrowed sweatshirt and jeans that were old when someone else wore them. The shelter is where Ava lives. The thought of Ava, small, dark-eyed Ava with her curling hair and the tremor in her voice when she asks if Rowan is coming back, makes Rowan's chest ache. Ava is 6 years old. She arrived at the shelter 8 weeks ago with no medical history, no emergency contact, no explanation. She simply appeared one Tuesday morning and did not speak to anyone for the first 3 weeks. Until Rowan found her hiding under a cot in the sleeping area, her tiny frame wedged against the wall, her eyes wide with a terror that no child should ever carry. Rowan had not rushed. She had simply sat on the floor beside the cot, not touching, not forcing, just breathing quietly in the darkness. She had talked about small things. The fog rolling in through the windows. The smell of sourdough bread from the bakery across the street. The way the city lights look like fallen stars when you see them reflected in the bay. That is just pretend, Ava had whispered. Stars cannot fall. No, Rowan had agreed. But sometimes we need to pretend that something beautiful is possible. Even when we know it probably is not. Ava had been silent for a long time. Then, do you live here too? No, Rowan said. I live in a different place. But I come here to see people I care about. Why? Ava's voice was so small it barely displaced the air. Because someone needed to see them the way Rowan wished someone had seen her. Because being invisible is a kind of death, and Rowan knew this in her bones. Because this small girl had haunted eyes and no one else was sitting on the floor beside her cot. Because, Rowan had said, you are worth seeing. Over 8 weeks, something had shifted between them. Ava had begun to trust her. She held Rowan's sleeve when the nightmares came. She showed Rowan the drawings she made with colored pencils, not pictures of anything real, but colors themselves, arranged in patterns that meant something only Ava understood. What do these mean? Rowan had asked once, pointing to a page covered in deep blues and dark purples. Colors for sad days, Ava had whispered. When I feel sad, I look at this, and I remember that sad days have colors too. Now Rowan stands in the ballroom of the Castellano mansion, knowing that Giovanni Castellano, the man whose penthouse she cleans, whose glasses she polishes, whose invisible presence she avoids, somehow knows about Ava. Somehow, Giovanni Castellano has known all along. She finishes her work by 9:15. She gathers her cleaning supplies. She moves through the mansion like a phantom, down the back stairs, through the staff corridors, until she reaches the locker room where she stores her things. The $78 sits in her locker, folded in a zippered pocket of her old jacket. She looks at it for a moment. $78. That is what the world has decided is worth paying her for 63 hours of work. In her other pocket, beneath the jacket, is a piece of paper. It is torn and water-stained, folded so many times that the creases have become soft. It is a college acceptance letter. San Francisco State University. Full scholarship. She had received it 4 years ago, before her mother's diagnosis, before the medical bills started arriving in envelopes that made her stomach hurt, before she realized that every dollar she earned meant the difference between her mother keeping her house and losing it to foreclosure. The letter is dated March 15, 2020. The scholarship was for the class of 2024. She never enrolled. Rowan changes into her waitress uniform in the staff bathroom. The uniform is a white blouse with 2 coffee stains she has tried unsuccessfully to bleach out, and black pants that pill at the thighs. She ties her hair back. She puts on the silver name tag that reads Rowan in block letters. She becomes invisible again, but in a different way. This invisibility is expected, demanded, compulsory. The drive to the Golden Meridian Hotel takes 45 minutes. She arrives at 10:36 in the morning. Her shift does not begin until 5, but Derek Collins has texted her to come early. Early means covering the lunch service. Early means no break. Early means more hours, technically, but the early shift pays the same rate as the regular shift because Derek has decided this is how it will be. The Golden Meridian occupies the top 3 floors of a building in the financial district. The restaurant itself is all dark wood and leather, designed to make powerful men feel comfortable spending $300 on a single meal. The kitchen is visible through a glass wall, a theater of efficiency where the sous chefs work in controlled silence beneath lights so bright they make Rowan's eyes water. Derek Collins stands near the host stand, his hand already reaching for the reservation book. He is in his mid-40s, with slicked back hair that smells like menthol and something expensive that Rowan could never afford. He wears a suit that costs more than her monthly rent. On his left wrist, a gold Rolex catches the light. He bought that watch with money skimmed from the tip pool. Rowan knows this. Everyone who works here knows this. No one says anything. "You are early," Derek says, looking at her for the first time. His eyes move across her face and body in a way that makes her skin crawl. "Good. I need you on the floor by 11. We have a party of 8 coming in. VIP clients. You will take their table personally." "Of course," Rowan says. "And Rowan," Derek continues, stepping closer. His hand finds her shoulder. It rests there. The weight of it is familiar and awful. You will smile when you take their order. You will bend down when you pour their water so they can see you. You will make sure they feel seen. Understood? His thumb moves slightly against the fabric of her blouse. Just enough that she notices. Just enough that he can claim he was not doing anything wrong if she ever complains. Which she will not. Which she cannot. Which Derek knows she cannot. "Understood," Rowan says. "Good girl," Derek says, and finally removes his hand. Rowan moves to the break room to store her jacket and the $78 that represents all her hope. The break room is a small space with plastic chairs and a refrigerator that smells like sour milk. Victoria Ashford is there, the events director, dressed in a suit that probably costs more than Rowan earns in a month. Victoria is in her early 50s, with perfectly maintained blonde hair and the kind of bones that suggest a lifetime of good genetics and better choices. Victoria looks up from her phone. She smiles. It is not a kind smile. "Rowan," Victoria says. "How nice that you are joining us early. Derek must trust you with something important." The implication hangs in the air like smoke. Derek trusts her. Which means Derek has decided something about her. Which means something is expected. "The VIP table," Rowan says quietly. "Of course," Victoria replies. She returns her attention to her phone. "You should be grateful, you know. Derek gives you so many hours. Other girls would kill for this opportunity. Most of them do not last more than a few months. But you keep showing up. That takes a certain kind of desperation, does not it?" Rowan does not respond. She has learned that there is no response that will make Victoria stop talking. There is only waiting for her to finish, the way you wait for a storm to pass. "My advice," Victoria continues, not looking at Rowan, "is to smile more. And worry less about whether people are treating you fairly. Fairness is for people with options. You do not have options, Rowan. So you smile. You bend. You do what you are told. And maybe, if you are very lucky, you keep this job long enough to solve whatever problem brought you here in the first place. Victoria leaves the break room, still not looking at Rowan. The silence she leaves behind is heavy and thick. Rowan sits in one of the plastic chairs. She thinks about Ava. She thinks about how Giovanni Castellano visits the shelter every Tuesday at the same time. She thinks about the torn college acceptance letter, dated March 15, 2020, for years ago, a different lifetime. She thinks about her mother, waiting at home, the surgery that costs $85,000, the number that sits in Rowan's mind like a tumor she cannot remove. She has $78. Rent is due in 3 days. Her mother's surgery date has been moved 3 times already. The doctors are losing patience. The hospital is losing patience. Everyone is losing patience with Rowan, except for Ava, who holds her sleeve and whispers, "Do not leave me." Outside, in the city, the afternoon light breaks through fog. The bay is the color of gunmetal. The golden meridian sits high above the streets where people with nothing walk past buildings where people with everything make decisions that affect thousands of lives they will never see. Rowan stands. She buttons her waitress blouse. She checks her name tag. She steps onto the floor, where the VIP clients are already being seated, where Derek Collins is already watching her with eyes that promise nothing good, where Victoria Ashford is checking her phone and wondering how much longer this desperate girl will last. Behind it all, in the Castellano mansion, Giovanni sits in his private office that Rowan was instructed never to approach. The walls are lined with books. The desk holds only a pen, a ledger, and a photograph in a silver frame. The photograph shows a woman and a baby. The baby is wearing yellow. The baby's name was Ava, and she died 15 years ago in a hospital room 3 hours after she was born. Giovanni looks at this photograph every single day. He has done this for 15 years. In 8 weeks, he has sent money to a shelter, not because he is a good man, but because he saw something in a small girl with dark curling hair that reminded him of what he lost. He did not know that Rowan Rivera was the reason Ava smiled again. He did not know about the colored pencils or the promise that sad days have colors too. He did not know that the invisible girl who cleaned his mansion had given his lost daughter a second life. Not yet. The winter night sits frozen over San Francisco like a blade wrapped in ice. Stars pierce the darkness, sharp as diamonds, so clear they seem close enough to touch. Frost covers the hills in silver, transforms the city into something crystalline and beautiful and utterly indifferent to the suffering happening in its shadows. Inside the Golden Meridian Hotel, the kitchen breathes heat and chaos. It is 1 a.m. The last tables have been cleared. The staff is counting registers and fighting exhaustion, and Rowan Rivera moves through it all like a ghost, her black uniform pressed despite 12 hours of service, her feet screaming in shoes that cost $8 at a discount outlet, her mind already calculating, rent due in 3 days, $78 in her locker, the gap between those numbers stretching like an ocean she cannot cross. She does not see Derek Collins waiting in the storage hallway. The hallway smells of cardboard and cleaning solution and the particular loneliness of places meant to be empty. Concrete floors. Industrial shelving holding linens and supplies and the accumulation of 1,000 nights just like this one. The lights are fluorescent, harsh, casting everything in shades of grey. Derek stands between her and the exit. He is 43 years old, thick-bodied in ways that suggest power and poor choices made casually, wearing a manager's suit that fits too tight at the waist, his hair slicked back with product that catches the fluorescent light. His eyes carry the particular cruelty of men who have never faced consequences, who confuse their own desires with destiny, who see refusal as betrayal. "You think you're too good for me?" His voice fills the hallway like smoke. "You think you can just ignore me?" Rowan's stomach contracts. She has been waiting for this moment the way a hunted animal waits for the predator to finally pounce. 3 months of stolen glances, lingering touches on her shoulders, private conversations about her job security, invitations she declined with increasingly firm language, and now, finally, he has stopped pretending. "Mr. Collins, I need to get home." Her voice emerges steady, barely a whisper. "My mother." "Your mother?" He steps closer. "Your mother is not my problem. You are my problem. You work in my restaurant. You exist because I allow it. And you will show me the respect I deserve. His hand moves to her throat. The impact pins her against the metal shelving. Her head strikes hard enough to send stars exploding across her vision. His fingers close around her neck, and the world narrows to the pressure, the smell of his cologne mixing with the smell of her own fear, the sound of her own gasping, the absolute certainty that this is how it ends, in a storage hallway, at 1 in the morning, with no one to hear her. But Rowan does something she has never done before. She fights. Her nails find his face. She drags them down his cheek, drawing blood, and he screams, actually screams, and his grip loosens just enough. She drives her knee upward, connects with something soft, and he doubles over, gasping. She runs. She almost makes it. His fist catches her from behind, connects with the back of her skull, and she stumbles. He grabs her by the collar and slams her against the wall. This time his fist comes toward her face. She cannot dodge it. She can only feel the impact, the way her eye socket shatters with pain, the taste of blood filling her mouth. She collapses to the concrete. Derek stands over her, breathing hard, straightening his tie with shaking fingers. His cheek is bleeding where her nails found purchase. His voice comes out low and venomous. You're fired. Effective immediately. And if you tell anyone what happened here, anyone, I will make sure you never work in this city again. Victoria and I have connections. Deep connections. We will destroy you so completely that you will wish you had kept your mouth shut from the beginning. He steps over her and walks away. 30 seconds of silence. Then Victoria Ashford appears in the doorway. She is 51 years old, elegant in ways that money and discipline create, her blonde hair styled in a perfect wave, wearing a dress that costs more than Rowan makes in a month. Her shoes are Italian leather. Her nails are manicured. Everything about her speaks of a woman who has never questioned whether she belonged in any space she occupied. She looks down at Rowan with the expression one reserves for a stain on carpet. You should have been smarter, dear. Her voice is perfectly modulated, almost kind. This is what happens when girls like you forget their place. When you think you can refuse the opportunities given to you. You should have been grateful. She steps over Rowan's body and walks away, her heels clicking against concrete, the sound disappearing into the distance. Rowan lies on the cold floor, her eye swelling shut, her throat screaming, her mouth filled with blood. The fluorescent light hums above her like an insect. She counts her breaths, in, out, because counting is the only thing keeping her from shattering completely. Then her phone vibrates. 3 missed calls. From the St. Francis shelter. Her blood turns to ice. Ava. The girl has nightmares. Terrible nightmares about the things that happened before the shelter, the hands that hurt her, the voices that promised safety and delivered darkness. Last week, Ava had a nightmare and called Rowan's name over and over until the night counselors had to hold her down. Tonight, Rowan checks the timestamp, the shelter called at 12:08 a.m. The girl had woken screaming. She had run. She had only spoken one name, over and over, Rowan, Rowan, Rowan. Rowan drags herself to her feet. Everything moves slowly, in fragments. Finding her bag. Walking to her car, a 2003 Honda Civic with a check engine light that has been on for 2 years. Driving through the empty streets of San Francisco, her hand shaking on the wheel, her vision swimming because one eye is swelling shut and she can barely see. The alley behind the Golden Meridian Hotel sits dark and narrow and filled with the smell of rotting things. Dumpsters line the walls. This is where the kitchen staff throws away food that is no longer perfect, where rats scurry in the darkness, where no one looks twice. Ava is curled against a dumpster, shaking in the November cold, wearing only a thin shelter-issued sweater, her small body contracted into a ball, her dark curls matted against her cheek. She looks up when she hears Rowan's footsteps. They hurt you. They hurt you. Ava's voice breaks into pieces. She reaches for Rowan, and Rowan scoops her up, pulls her close, feels the small girl's entire body trembling against her chest. It's okay, sweet girl. I've got you. I've got you. But Rowan's mind is fracturing. 3 months of exhaustion. The stolen tips adding up to hundreds of dollars she will never see. The $78 that represents her entire safety net. The medical bills stacked on her kitchen table, the surgery her mother needs in 6 weeks, the window that is closing on her mother's time, the absolute certainty that she has failed at the one thing she has been trying to do, survive. Where can she go? Her apartment is too small. Her mother is sleeping, recovering from her last hospital visit, and bringing Ava there would endanger them both. The police will not help, they will take Ava into the system, and the system will destroy her the way it destroyed so many others. There is only one place Rowan has keys to. Only one place she knows will be empty at this hour, a place she enters every Tuesday morning at 5, moving through marble halls like a ghost, cleaning rooms that cost more to furnish than she will earn in her entire life. The Castellano mansion. She drives through the empty streets, Ava's small hand clutching her sleeve, whispering, "Do not leave me, do not leave me." The fog rolls in from the bay, thick and obscuring. Red lights blur into green lights. The city transforms into something dreamlike and distant. The service entrance is locked, but Rowan knows the code. She has cleaned the same floors for 3 months, has watched the guards change the keypad sequence every 7 days, has memorized each new combination because memorizing things is how she survives. She punches in the numbers, 4-7-2-1. The door opens. The mansion exhales cold air and darkness. Her footsteps echo on marble as she moves deeper into it, down the stairs toward the underground level, past the security door she should not be able to open but does because she has watched Rocco enter the code 100 times. Down, always down, into the part of the house that exists in shadow. The underground poker room sits at the very bottom. It is 3 minutes past 3 in the morning. Giovanni Castellano sits alone at the felt table, a cigar burning between his fingers, smoke curling around his face in geometric patterns. He is wearing his suit from the day, charcoal grey, perfectly tailored, worth more than Rowan's car, but his tie is loosened, his collar open, revealing the silver chain he wears beneath. His dark eyes stare at nothing, fixed on some point beyond the wall, and the expression on his face carries the particular weight of a man who has not slept in years. He does not hear her enter. Rowan stands in the doorway, one eye swollen shut, handprints purple across her throat, her blood soaking through her white blouse in spreading stains, Ava's small body held against her hip. The child has gone silent, watching this powerful man with the kind of wariness children develop when they have learned too early that the world contains predators. Giovanni's eyes shift. He sees her. He rises slowly, the cigar falling from his fingers, forgotten, smoke still curling from where it lands on the felt table. His face goes absolutely still, drains of color, and in that moment, that single moment, something in the architecture of his frozen grief shifts irrevocably. Because the small girl holding onto Rowan's sleeve, the one with dark curling hair and dark eyes, is exactly the way his daughter would have looked. What is her name? His voice comes out broken, fractured, and neither Rowan nor Rocco and Franco, who appear in the doorway behind Rowan with their hands moving toward weapons, have ever heard him sound like this before. Rowan sways on her feet, barely conscious, her voice barely a whisper, "Ava." Her name is Ava. Giovanni's knees nearly buckle. Rocco steps forward, his instinct to protect, to remove this bleeding woman and child from his boss's presence, but Giovanni's hand rises, a gesture so small it barely moves the air, and both men freeze. "My daughter," Giovanni whispers. "My daughter's name was Ava." The guards exchange a look neither can interpret. In 15 years, they have never seen him like this. In 15 years, his face has remained a mask. But now it cracks. His hands are shaking. He reaches toward the child but stops, his fingers suspended in the space between them, as though he fears his touch will break her. "Where did you find her?" he asks Rowan, but his eyes never leave Ava's face. Rowan tries to explain through the pain, the shelter, the weeks of building trust, how Ava would not speak to anyone, how she held Rowan's hand the first time without flinching, how every day Rowan brought her colored pencils because Ava had said that sad days have colors too. But the words dissolve into nothing, and the world tilts sideways, and Rowan understands with absolute clarity that she is going to fall. Giovanni catches her before she hits the ground. His arms are strong enough to hold her entire weight, and she collapses against him, and the last thing she feels before the darkness takes her is Ava's small hand still gripping her sleeve, whispering, "Do not leave me, do not leave me," and the absolute certainty that whatever happens next, whatever follows this moment, will change everything. 3 days after the attack, Rowan stood in the marble hallway of the Castellano mansion and made a decision that terrified Giovanni Castellano in a way nothing else ever had. She insisted on returning to the Golden Meridian Hotel. She needed to face Derek Collins herself. She needed to quit. She needed to reclaim something, anything, that Derek had stolen from her beyond money and safety and dignity. Giovanni's voice carried the weight of absolute command, the kind of tone that made grown men move mountains. "Let me handle this. You will stay here where you are safe." But Rowan shook her head, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. The bruises on her throat had begun to yellow at the edges, like autumn leaves, and they pulsed with every word she spoke. "He has taken everything from me. Every shift I worked for nothing. Every tip I earned and never saw. Every moment I was afraid to say no. I need to face him myself. I need to walk away from that place on my own terms, or I will spend the rest of my life running from him." Giovanni studied her face, and for the first time in 15 years, his men saw their boss genuinely uncertain. Rocco exchanged a glance with Franco that said everything. They had never witnessed him hesitate like this. Finally, Giovanni nodded, but his jaw tightened. "You will not go alone." The night was crystalline and brutal. Frost covered every surface of San Francisco, the sidewalks, the fire escapes, the windows of closed shops, as though the city itself had frozen solid with fear. Stars hung overhead like diamonds scattered across black velvet, sharp and cold and infinite. The temperature had dropped to 28 degrees, and the wind cut through the streets like a blade wrapped in ice. Rowan stood outside the service entrance of the Golden Meridian Hotel at 11 p.m., her hands shaking not from the cold but from the fear that lived in her bones like a permanent guest. She wore a simple black coat over her maid's uniform, the same uniform she had worn for 8 months, and every fiber of her being wanted to turn around and run. Through the kitchen window, she could see Derek laughing with Victoria Ashford. Both of them comfortable. Both of them untouchable. Both of them unaware that their world was about to collapse. Victoria leaned close to Derek, and he placed his hand on her back with the casual possession of someone who believed they owned the world. Rowan's courage broke like thin ice under pressure. She thought, what if Giovanni is wrong? What if they truly are untouchable? What if I report them and nothing happens? What if I am just a maid, and this is all I will ever be? Her hand moved to her pocket. Her fingers found the torn college acceptance letter, the one from San Francisco State University, the one that had arrived 3 weeks before Derek assaulted her. The letter was creased from being folded and unfolded 1,000 times, the edges soft and worn like fabric. She had held it so many times, imagining a different life, that the paper had become almost fragile. She thought about running. Getting Ava and disappearing somewhere Derek and Victoria would never find them. Living small and invisible forever. Changing her name. Working under the table. Existing in the shadows that had become so familiar they felt like home. The cold burned her lungs with every breath. Her right eye throbbed where Derek's fist had connected, a persistent ache that reminded her every second that she was broken. Every breath hurt. Her ribs were bruised. Her throat ached. Her spirit was fractured in ways she could not yet name. She turned to leave. But then she heard Ava's voice in her memory, not the broken child she had first met at the shelter, but the child Ava had become in 3 months of safety. The child who drew pictures with color she called feelings colors. The child who had whispered, barely audible, "Rowan saved me." And Rowan thought, no. Not anymore. I will not be invisible anymore. I will not let them tell the story of who I am. I will tell it myself. She walked inside. Derek saw her immediately. His face darkened the way storm clouds darken the sky before lightning strikes. He was standing in the storage hallway, surrounded by boxes of linens and bottles of expensive wine, when Rowan stepped through the kitchen doors. Victoria materialized beside him like she had been waiting, expecting this moment. Derek's voice dripped with contempt. "You have nerve showing up here. I thought you learned your lesson." Rowan's hand shook, but her voice came out steady, not loud, but clear. "I quit. And I am reporting you to the Labor Board, to the police, to anyone who will listen." Derek laughed. The sound made her skin crawl. He moved closer, and she forced herself not to step backward. "You think anyone will believe you? You are nothing. I am management. Victoria and I have friends in this city. Real friends with power. People who matter." Victoria stepped into Rowan's space, her expression colder than the night outside. Her designer heels clicked against the tile floor. When she spoke, each word was careful and precise and absolutely lethal. "Derek is right, dear. You are making a terrible mistake. Walk away now and we will forget this happened. Forget you ever made these accusations. Forget you were ever here. Keep talking, and we will destroy you. We will have you deported, arrested, disappeared. Do you understand me?" Derek's hand closed around Rowan's arm. His fingers dug in, and pain shot through her shoulder. His voice dropped to something intimate and terrible. "You are going to take back everything you just said, or I promise you, sweetheart, you will regret it for the rest of your life. Whatever life you have left, anyway." The storage room door exploded inward. Giovanni Castellano walked through it like he owned the space itself, which, as it turned out, he did. Rocco moved on his left side. Franco on his right. Behind them, 10 more men in identical black suits, moving with the choreographed silence of a funeral procession. Their faces were blank and their eyes were empty of mercy. The temperature in the room seemed to drop another 10 degrees. Derek's hand released Rowan's arm. He tried to sound authoritative. "Who the hell are you? This is private property. You cannot just—" Giovanni moved faster than a man his size should be able to move. His hand closed around Derek's throat exactly where Derek's handprints bruised Rowan's neck. Derek's eyes bulged. His face reddened. He made a sound like a wounded animal. Giovanni's voice was quiet, barely above a whisper, but it carried the weight of absolute finality. "I am the man who owns this hotel. I purchased it 48 hours ago through shell companies that you will never trace. I am the man who has spent 72 hours investigating every illegal thing you have ever done. And I am the man who is going to watch you pay for every moment you made her afraid." He released Derek, who collapsed against the shelving unit, gasping for breath. Giovanni pulled out his phone and made a single call. "Send them in." Within minutes, perhaps 3, perhaps 5, time moved differently in that space. FBI agents poured through every entrance of the Golden Meridian Hotel. 12 agents in dark blue windbreakers, badges flashing like accusations, radios crackling with official language. They moved through the kitchen with the precision of people who had prepared for this moment. They sealed the exits. They began collecting evidence that had been waiting to be found for 18 months. Derek had committed wage theft against 207 employees. He had embezzled $540,000 over 4 years. He had falsified tax documents and conspired with Victoria Ashford to intimidate witnesses into silence. Giovanni had provided the FBI with everything: financial records that showed the exact amounts, surveillance footage from cameras he had secretly installed, witness statements from 30 employees who had been too afraid to speak before but who trusted Giovanni Castellano. The lead FBI agent, a woman with steel-gray eyes and a voice like granite, handcuffed Derek while he was still on his knees. "Derek Collins, you are under arrest for wire fraud, racketeering, conspiracy to commit extortion, and aggravated assault." Derek begged. His voice fractured into something barely human. "Please, please, I will give the money back. I will confess to everything. Please do not do this." Giovanni's response was ice: "Too quick. Too easy. Too merciful to simply kill you, which is what you deserve." Instead, you will spend the next 40 years in federal prison. Every single day, you will remember the maid you thought was nobody. You will remember that her name is Rowan. You will remember that you were wrong. The FBI led Derek out through the kitchen while every staff member watched in stunned silence. Cooks, dishwashers, other servers. People Rowan had worked beside for 8 months. People who had never spoken up. People who had benefited from Derek's economy of exploitation. All of them stared with their mouths open as Derek Collins, the manager who had terrorized them, was led away in handcuffs, sobbing like a child who had lost everything. Because he had. Victoria Ashford tried to run. She made it through the lobby, past the front desk, into the freezing night. Her heels clicked against the pavement as she ran toward the parking garage. Her breath came in panic gasps. She reached her Mercedes, a luxury sedan worth more than Rowan earned in 3 years, and fumbled for her keys. Rocco was already there, leaning casually against the driver's side door as though he had been waiting for her specifically. He smiled, not a kind expression, but something dangerous and patient. Victoria's voice sharpened into something desperate. Move. I do not know who you are, but you need to move right now. Rocco did not move. We know all of them. The city councilman you bribe every month. The police captain you have blackmail photographs of. The judge you keep in your pocket. Every single one of them is being arrested right now. They are taking away your insurance policy, Victoria. Your safety net. Your empire of protection. FBI agents surrounded her before she could respond. The female lead agent, the same one who had arrested Derek, stepped forward with handcuffs. Victoria Ashford, you are under arrest for racketeering, conspiracy to commit fraud, bribery of public officials, and witness tampering. News vans appeared as if summoned by some dark magic. Giovanni had made sure of it. Cameras rolled. Lights flooded the parking garage with white, exposing every detail of Victoria's collapse. She screamed at the cameras, her perfect composure finally cracking like a frozen lake in spring. This is illegal. You cannot do this. I have done nothing wrong. But the footage would be everywhere by morning. Every news channel in the Bay Area would play the clip of events director Victoria Ashford, in her designer suit and her perfect makeup, being led away in handcuffs. Her reputation, built over years of social climbing and strategic cruelty, would evaporate like water in the desert sun. Her assets would be frozen. Her social connections severed. The people who had courted her favor would deny they ever knew her. And she would spend 40 years in a federal prison cell, her entire existence reduced to a number and a bunk, and the knowledge that she had been wrong about power, truly, irreversibly wrong. Giovanni found Rowan standing in the hotel lobby. She was surrounded by FBI agents and news cameras and her former co-workers, all of them staring at her with new eyes. The invisible maid had become visible. The nobody had become someone. The entire geometry of their world had shifted in a single night. Giovanni approached quietly, the sounds of the chaos, radios crackling, voices shouting, cameras flashing, muffled by something that felt like mercy. Are you all right? Rowan, tears streaming down her face, her voice fractured like breaking glass. You destroyed them. You destroyed them for me. Giovanni, no. They destroyed themselves long ago. I simply made sure everyone could see it. He handed her an envelope. Inside, a check for $85,000, the exact amount she needed in 3 days, now multiplied beyond her desperation. Beneath it, a letter confirming her readmission to San Francisco State University with all expenses paid. Tuition. Housing. Books. Everything. Giovanni's voice, when he spoke, carried something she had never heard before, not exactly gentleness, because he was still a man carved from stone and shadow, but something close to it. You are not nobody, Rowan Rivera. You never were. You were always worth saving. Ava ran through the crowd then, impossibly small, her legs moving as fast as they could carry her. She crashed into Rowan's arms, and Rowan dropped to her knees, holding the child like she was made of crystal and light. Ava's voice, Barely a whisper, "You came back. You always come back." Giovanni watched them, this woman who had taught him how to hope again, this child who had reminded him why he had a heart, and for the first time in 15 years, he allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the future could be different. The darkness that had defined his life was not gone. But it was no longer all that he was. 6 weeks had passed since the federal agents led Derek Collins away in handcuffs, his face hollow with the weight of a 40-year sentence stretching before him like a prison corridor with no end. The news cameras had caught everything, his hands trembling, his lawyer whispering frantically, the look in his eyes when he finally understood that the invisible maid he had terrorized for 3 years had dismantled his entire empire with nothing but the truth. Victoria Ashford's trial lasted 19 days. The courtroom footage played on every news channel in California, every network replaying the moment her own attorney read the verdict, and she collapsed into sobs, her social standing shattered more completely than her freedom ever could be. 40 years. No parole until she was 83 years old. The Golden Meridian Hotel had been seized by federal investigators, its management restructured entirely, and 87 people across California, hotel managers, restaurant owners, shift supervisors who had operated the same extortion network Derek and Victoria had perfected, were arrested in coordinated raids across 3 states. Over $12 million in stolen wages was recovered and returned to the workers who had been systematically robbed for years. Rosa, who had cleaned the Castellano mansion's east wing for 16 years, sat in her modest apartment watching the news and wept. She had worked beside Rowan Rivera for months, exchanged pleasantries about the weather and her daughter's school, never truly seeing her. After the arrest, after the truth emerged, Rosa understood what she had failed to recognize. The exhaustion in Rowan's eyes was not laziness but desperation. The way she ate only after everyone else had finished was not preference but hunger. On television, the reporter said Rowan's name like she was important, like she mattered, and Rosa felt something crack open in her chest, the terrible knowledge that she had passed by someone suffering and called it invisible. At San Francisco State University, Rowan walked across the campus on a Thursday morning in early December, her bruises now faded to pale yellow shadows that makeup could conceal. She carried a heavy backpack filled with economics textbooks and a notebook where she took notes in handwriting that grew steadier each day. The college acceptance letter, the one she had found torn in half in Derek's office wastebasket 3 years ago, now hung framed on the wall of the bedroom Giovanni had given her in the mansion. Full scholarship. All expenses paid. Tuition, housing, books, everything that had seemed impossible now arranged by a man who understood the weight of impossible dreams because his own had died 15 years ago. But Rowan did not spend her days only in lectures. Every afternoon at 3 o'clock, she was waiting at the gates of St. Catherine's Children's Home, and Ava would run toward her with the kind of joy that healed something broken inside Rowan's chest. The 7-year-old had been moved to a permanent residence, away from the shelter where she had lived in fragmented moments between hope and abandonment. Giovanni had arranged everything, lawyers, paperwork, the slow legal machinery that would formalize what he had already decided in his heart. The nursery had waited untouched for 15 years. Giovanni had kept it exactly as it was the day his daughter died, the small white crib, the mobile with painted stars, the dresser with drawers full of clothes that no child would ever wear. Pink walls. Soft carpet. A window overlooking San Francisco's Bay, as though a view could ease the weight of losing a child you would never hold conscious, never hear speak, never watch grow. On a Saturday morning, Rowan and Giovanni stood together in that room, the silence so complete it felt like grief had a sound. Giovanni held a small pink blanket, the one he had wrapped his daughter in for the brief hours before she was gone. His hands trembled. When he finally spoke, his voice carried the sound of ice breaking. "I thought if I kept everything exactly as it was, I could keep her alive somehow. Frozen in time. Mine forever." Rowan's voice came soft, steady like a prayer. "You were not betraying her by living." Giovanni turned to face her, and his eyes held the accumulated weight of 15 years of loss. "You taught me that. You and Ava. You showed me that loving someone who is alive does not diminish the memory of someone you lost. That hope is not a betrayal of grief." They worked together in that room, packing away the clothes, carefully folding the blanket, rolling the mobile and storing it in a box marked with his daughter's name. They hung new curtains in shades of pale blue and soft yellow. They assembled a new bed, a child-sized frame with rails, nothing that whispered abandonment. They hung drawings that Ava had made at school, crude pictures of houses and families, and a small figure holding the hand of a tall man. Ava appeared in the doorway at 4 in the afternoon, her backpack still slung across one shoulder, her eyes enormous with uncertainty. She had been afraid to ask about the changes, afraid that wanting something meant it would be taken away, a logic learned from years of temporary placements and social workers who smiled and then disappeared. Giovanni knelt to meet her at eye level, his hands large and dark against the doorframe, his voice stripped down to something vulnerable and true. "Is this your room?" "If you want it to be." Ava ran to him with the kind of momentum that came from needing to believe someone would not step backward. Giovanni closed his eyes as she collided with his chest, her small arms reaching around his neck, and Rocco, standing quietly in the hallway, witnessed something that had not happened in his entire tenure working for Giovanni Castellano. His boss allowed himself to be held. His shoulders curved around the child. His chin rested on her hair. And when he opened his eyes, they were glistening with tears that had been locked behind fortress walls for so long they had calcified into stone. Rowan watched from the window seat and understood that she was witnessing the moment grief transformed into something survivable. Giovanni was not forgetting his daughter by loving Ava. He was learning that the human heart was not a fixed amount of love that could be divided and depleted. It was infinite, capable of holding multiple truths. His daughter had been real and precious and lost, and Ava was real and precious and here. Both could be true. Both could matter. That evening, the three of them sat at the dinner table, the long mahogany surface usually empty now crowded with plates and conversation and the sound of a child's laughter. Ava talked about school, about her arithmetic test, about the way the teacher had explained fractions using apples. Giovanni listened like she was telling him secrets of the universe. Rowan reached for his hand beneath the table, and his fingers intertwined with hers with the certainty of someone who had finally stopped fearing that touching something precious would cause it to shatter. The mansion that had been a mausoleum was becoming a home. On the balcony at midnight, with frost sparkling across the railing like ground glass, Giovanni spoke what had been building in his chest for weeks. The city stretched below them, 12 million people sleeping in 12 million separate circumstances, and none of them mattered. Only this moment mattered. Only this woman who had stumbled into his darkness and refused to let him remain frozen. "I do not know how to do this," he said, his hands gripping the railing. "I do not know how to be what Ava needs." He stopped, unable to complete the sentence. Rowan turned to face him, and the starlight caught in her eyes like reflected hope. What? Giovanni released the railing and looked at her directly, every wall dismantled. "The night you stumbled into that poker room bleeding, I was sitting alone the way I had sat alone for 15 years, surrounded by money and power and men who would die without hesitation if I commanded it, and I had never been more empty. You brought light into my darkness. You and Ava. You saved me." Rowan's voice emerged barely above a whisper. "You saved me too. We saved each other." And it was true. She had saved him on the worst night of his life by bringing Ava and giving him a reason to heal. He had saved her on hers by destroying the people who had taught her to make herself small, by insisting with the full weight of his power that she was not nobody, that she was not invisible, that she deserved to exist without fear. They were bound now by shared darkness and the light they had found together in the ruins. Giovanni reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. The diamond inside caught the moonlight like frozen tears, like all the tears he had not allowed himself to shed for 15 years, now finally transformed into something that could catch the light and refract it into color. "Stay. Not as someone who works for me. As someone who," he paused. "As someone I want to build a life with. As Ava's mother. As my wife, if you will have me." Rowan kissed him then, and it was an answer that needed no words. His hands moved to her face, gentle despite their size, and she felt the trembling in them, the vulnerability of a man who had spent his entire life believing that showing weakness was the same as death. With her, he had learned it was the same as freedom. 2 weeks later, Giovanni Castellano formally adopted Ava Rivera, changing her name legally to Ava Castellano, making official what had already been decided in every heart present. Rowan continued her university studies while living in the mansion, moving through its halls no longer as invisible help but as its visible heart. She was working toward a degree in social work, driven by the understanding that what had happened to her had happened to thousands of others, invisible people being stolen from by those who counted on their invisibility. On a January evening, the three of them sat together at the dinner table one more time, and Ava laughed at something Giovanni had said, a genuine sound of childhood joy that echoed through rooms that had held only silence for so long. Rowan reached for Giovanni's hand, and he pulled her close, and Ava climbed into their laps with the unself-consciousness of a child who had finally learned that being held was not temporary, that love was not a borrowed thing that would be reclaimed. This was not a fairy tale where the powerful prince rescued the helpless peasant. This was two broken people, a man shattered by grief, a woman ground down by powerlessness, who saw each other's fractures and chose to build something new from their shared scars. And that choice, that commitment to healing together, was more powerful than any lie that love was simple. Because the truth that nobody tells you about darkness and light is this: darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only love can do that. Only the insistence that you are worth saving. Only the presence of someone who refuses to let you disappear. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, like and share this video with the people you love. Every comment you leave is a precious source of motivation. We wish all of you good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace.